Since the UCAT is such a mysterious test, so many people have asked me, when do you need to start studying? How much did you study for the UCAT? And if you're one of these people and you don't really know how much people are studying for the UCAT or how people balance their schoolwork with their UCAT preparation, this is the video for you. Hi guys, and welcome back to the YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name is Emil and I'm a first year medical student at Monash University, and I recently graduated from Scotch College with an ATAR of 99.8 and a 99th percentile UCAT. As you can see, a couple of things are different in this week's video. I've gotten a haircut and I've also gotten a new hoodie. As you could probably tell from the intro, a lot of people have been sending me DMs asking for advice on Instagram or Facebook. So if you have any questions about Year 12, VCE or the UCAT, feel free to send me a DM on either Instagram or Facebook, and I will always try to reply to it and give my best advice as to what I would do if I were in your situation. So without further ado, let's get into the video, which will be separated into 3 parts. So the first part of this video will be me showing you guys exactly how much I studied for the UCAT in 2020, something which I measured on an app called Forest, which I've used to show you guys how much I studied in a previous video as well. In the second part of this video, I'll be talking about what I would recommend you guys do if you were to prepare for the UCAT right now and when I started, as well as what I was doing to prepare. The third and final part of this video will be me explaining how I think the best way is to manage your UCAT preparation with your schoolwork, because I think it can be very difficult to balance these two things and to do well in both of them. So without further ado, let's get on to the first part of this video. So as you can see, I've opened up the Forest app on my phone. And if you don't know what Forest is, it's an app that you can use to track your study time, as well as it sort of helps to stop your phone usage while you're studying. So the way the app works is you usually plant a tree when you decide to study, and then during that time, you can't really use your phone. It's stuck on this sort of timer screen. So the thing about Forest that I found very helpful was that it would track your schoolwork, and I'd use it to track how much I was studying for all of my subjects to sort of get a better idea of how much I was working, whether I needed to do more, or whether I need to do more in specific subjects or less in others. So what I'll do now is I'll open the Forest data section, and what this will do is it will show you how many trees I planted over a certain time period, so that's day, week, month, and year. And I can also set it to show only my UCAT tags. In another video, I talked about how much I studied for my schoolwork, and you can check that out. It will be linked in the description below. But for this video, I'll be showing you how much I studied for the UCAT. So for my tags, I will set it to be deselected, and then I'll select UCAT, showing only the study I did for the UCAT in 2020. So what you can see is this is how much I studied for the UCAT in 2020. It's a total of 79 hours. I actually did study a little bit in 2019, but this is such a measly amount that I won't even bother adding it to the total. So yeah, as you can see, I've studied 79 hours and 6 minutes for the UCAT in 2020. This number probably won't mean much to you, but hopefully you can get an idea of how much people are actually studying for the UCAT. So if I hover over each of these months, you can actually see how much I studied each month for the UCAT. So in January, it was 10 hours and 43 minutes, then 12 hours, 4 minutes, 6 hours, 9 hours, 12 hours, 4 hours, and then finally in the month before was 22 hours. My test day was on August the 2nd, so it makes sense that July would be the greatest month. So you'll also see that my most focused day of the week was a Saturday, and this was usually because I did a practice exam on Saturdays every week, and I'll get into this a bit more later, but it does help that I know that I was doing a lot of my work on Saturdays. So another thing I will show you is that I can separate this by week. So if I were to go by week, you can see that in the start of 2020, which I will scroll back to, I did about 5 hours a week, then 1 hour. And then as the school term started, I was doing a lot less. So I was doing about 45, 39, and that would have been the holidays. So as you can see, my practice wasn't necessarily really consistent. It was quite a bit sporadic, but when I was doing practice, I was making sure to do it quite heavily. And if I was doing it very heavily, I would also make sure that it was good practice. So that wraps up my tour of Forest, and I'll move on to talk about these stats a little bit more and elaborate on how much I was studying for the UCAT. So now that you've seen my Forest page, you've probably got a general idea of how much I was studying, but I'd like to elaborate on that and explain sort of how much I was doing and what that study took the form of in each week. So what happened was, at the start of the year, I sort of knew that my test day was going to be in July somewhere, and eventually I knew that it would be in late July, so around the 26th of July, but then it eventually got pushed back to August 2nd because of coronavirus, unfortunately. But what happened was, since I knew that my test day was going to be in late July, I knew that there were going to be about 30 weeks that I had to prepare for the UCAT. If you divide that time, about 80 hours that I had in Forest over that 30-week period, that gives you about 2 hours and 40 minutes that I was doing each week on average and study for the UCAT, which is actually quite a lot in my opinion, because during school time, you really don't have that much time to be putting into the UCAT. You really do get overwhelmed quite quickly with SACs, assessments, homework, and all of that for your 5 subjects. So what I found was that I was actually doing a lot of UCAT preparation when I didn't have schoolwork to do. So this was on times like the weekends, the holidays, things like that. I would really be grinding the UCAT a lot more than I was during the school term. So even though it says that I was doing about 2 hours and 30 minutes every week, this really is more like 4 hours each week on the holidays and then not as much on the weekdays of the term. The point I'm trying to make through this is not that you should be super worried about how little or how much UCAT practice you're actually doing, but that the UCAT practice doesn't necessarily have to happen really consistently, even though it might be beneficial to do it consistently. But sometimes, schoolwork just takes over. It's hard to do UCAT preparation during the weeks in the school term. That makes sense and it's understandable. And you need to be making up for that time during the school holidays or the times you have during the week that might be free from schoolwork. So now I'll move on to the second part of this video, which will be elaborating on how much I was preparing by explaining what was involved in the preparation I was doing for the UCAT, as well as what I would recommend you do and when you should start. So starting with that last one, when you should start, I do recommend that you should start for the UCAT as early as possible. If you're doing the testing this year in July or August, I do recommend that if you haven't started, you should start straight away, because the more time you have for the UCAT, the less pressure there is to perform, and also the more time you have to improve on your specific weaknesses. As you probably saw in my Forest page, I technically started revising for the UCAT in August of the year before, but for the entirety of 2019, I only did about 4 hours of UCAT preparation. So in general, I don't really count that as part of my UCAT study. I'd say that I actually started preparing for the UCAT in the January of 2020, and that's when I sort of recommend people start preparing as well, because it allows you to have that sort of period of relaxation in December from the year before, but then also getting into year 12, starting straight afresh in January allows you to sort of get into the UCAT while you don't have the pressures of schoolwork. So now to elaborate on what I was doing in that 2 hours and 40 minutes on average each week, I'd like to say that when I started preparing for the UCAT, I was starting by learning the subtests, learning the types of questions, and getting familiarized with the timings of the test and how the test actually worked. So what that involved was, in January, I'd be learning the subtests, learning the question types, sort of doing my research on what the best way to approach those question types were, and getting familiarized with how the timing worked for the test, and getting a grasp on accuracy rather than speed at the start so that I could answer questions accurately, but taking a lot of time in doing so. When the school term sort of started, I was a bit more comfortable with what I was doing with each question type. So then what I do is I do more drills during the week. So I'd be doing, UCAT verbal reasoning 10 question drills, for example, on a Monday night or on a Tuesday night, or whenever I had free time, basically. So I felt that this helped me a lot, and it's something that all of the people doing the UCAT should do, is that you should really try and keep things fresh in your mind by doing practice whenever you have free time. So if I came home from school night and I finished all my homework and it was maybe 9 o'clock, I'd try to do an hour or maybe 30 minutes of UCAT, just drill work, doing small questions from a question bank or from the online website, just explaining to myself and consolidating that thought process of what it takes to answer each question type. After that period where I was getting comfortable with the test, I actually started straight away by doing a practice test, and what that did was it gave me a good idea of where I was at, and it was a practice test I struggled, I failed horribly at it. I scored in the 62nd percentile, some of my subtests were in the 11th percentile, so It means in the bottom 11% of people taking the test. So, in those first tests, it's really just about getting your idea of what the test is like, how hard it is, and getting an idea of the challenge that you're up for. I really recommend doing a practice test really early on to sort of get an idea and get an idea in your head of what the test actually asks you to do. After that couple of weeks where I did my first test, I started getting into this nice routine of where I was doing sort of one practice exam every 2 weeks and reviewing it the week after. So what I would do is 1 week I'd do a practice exam, a full 2-hour practice exam on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, for example. And then what I'd do is throughout the next week, in those sort of times I had after class or after schoolwork at night, I'd be reviewing that practice exam subtest by subtest. So what I'd do is I'd go through that verbal reasoning, I'd look at the questions I'd gotten wrong, and I'd ask myself, why did I get that wrong? And then I'd have a look at the question and see whether I thought it was ambiguous, or whether I thought it wasn't worth doing in time, or whether there was no way I'd be able to do that question in the time I had for it. So doing all of that, I sort of got closer and closer to test day, and then I think about a month or 2 months before test day, I'd start to be doing around a practice exam every week, and then I'd spend some time reviewing it. I did end up getting a bit lazy towards the end about reviewing practice exams, because I did find it was quite hard to review them because it took a lot of energy. I was already tired from doing the test, and then it was another ask entirely to sort of review the whole test again. But it is something that helped me a lot. So I do recommend trying your best to do reviews for every test you do. As I got closer and closer to test day, I wanted to sort of ease out on my practice. So I was sort of making sure I wasn't getting really, really tired. I wasn't trying to do too many tests, so that I was wanting to avoid the burnout that can happen for people who try to push themselves too hard in practice. So what I did was in the week before to the test leading up, I started to ease off on practice. I'd only be doing drills. I'd only be doing maybe a subtest mock here and there to sort of relieve the pressure that I had on myself, and also to sort of make myself feel better going into the test. Now, hopefully you have a better idea of what I was actually doing in that 2 hours and 40 minutes each week as preparation for the UCAT. And hopefully you can see that, the steps in preparation are quite sequential, and it makes sense that you're eventually easing your way into doing the test to your best potential. So now that I've explained that, I'd like to move on to part 3 of this video, which is how I manage my schoolwork along with my UCAT preparation. Now, when talking about how hard it is to balance your UCAT with your schoolwork, I completely understand, because for example, at the uni I go to, Monash University, the UCAT is worth 33% of your admission, and your ATAR is worth exactly the same, 33% of your admission. So because of that, it can be really daunting to know that a test that you might not know that much about is worth exactly the same as your ATAR. And because of that, you also feel that you might want to be putting in the same amount of work for your UCAT and your ATAR. But in reality, it never works out like that, because people never have classes for UCAT, people never have homework for the UCAT. It's all self-directed sort of exam preparation. And in addition, I find that you shouldn't be too hard on yourself, because really your ATAR can help you get into any course, whereas the UCAT will only help you get into medicine or dental schools and things like that. So what I say in general is that definitely your schoolwork will be a higher proportion of the time you're spending studying, but you should also treat the UCAT like a 6th or 7th subject that you have. And the reasoning behind this is that yes, the UCAT is an extremely difficult and important test, but if you were to put so much time into the UCAT, you'd probably lose your mind. And the reason for this is that the UCAT is quite a hard test, and putting in a lot of work sometimes doesn't really net the results that you want it to. Now, one of the strategies I find helps a lot with balancing UCAT and schoolwork is that you should keep Monday to Friday mostly for schoolwork. And what this does, it sort of helps you to alleviate the pressure on your mind to be studying the UCAT, and you can really focus on your schoolwork and your SACs and your homework and all of that during the week, and then know that you can leave some stuff for the weekend for your UCAT preparation. So what this means is that yes, I'd be doing some drills during the week, during certain times of the term, but this was only really when I felt like I didn't have that much homework to do, or if I felt that I didn't have a SAC coming up, or I felt that I didn't have too much pressure on me to be doing schoolwork that week. So I really do recommend prioritizing your schoolwork during Monday to Friday, but then leaving that weekend for the UCAT a little bit more. So when I talk about leaving the weekend for UCAT a little bit more, what I mean is that you should definitely try to do the majority of your UCAT practice on the weekend. I find that this helps a lot with time management, and it also allows you to do like a solid block of UCAT practice rather than maybe 30 minutes each weeknight. Because I find that UCAT is something that if you do 2 hours at a time, this can be sometimes more beneficial than 30 minutes each night, which is actually kind of contradictory. It's something you don't expect for subjects like maths and English and things like that. The reason I say sometimes doing UCAT in a 2-hour block is better because doing exams is really the best way to prepare for the UCAT, and an exam is going to be 2 hours long and you can't really split up an exam over the weekdays. It doesn't really work as well, and it won't work as well as you like. So that was the first strategy I used for managing my time with the UCAT and schoolwork. And then the second thing that I'd highly recommend is that you should definitely make the most out of the holidays you have to study for the UCAT. So the holidays is a huge opportunity for you to be studying the UCAT, just because the holidays gives you so much time to be relaxing, doing schoolwork, and also UCAT. And during the holidays, you have such a huge amount of time that you really can't be skimping on UCAT practice at all. And it really is the time to get ahead on your UCAT practice rather than having to do consistent UCAT practice throughout the term, which will undoubtedly stress you out quite a lot. The final tip I would give you for managing your UCAT and schoolwork is that you should try and book your test day during the school holidays, if possible, or in the first week of term 3. So the UCAT in Australia and New Zealand at least usually have their testing dates between July to August of that year. And what this means is that this testing period correlates quite nicely with the semester 1 holiday break. And what this means is that if you can fit your UCAT into that holiday break, you can go straight into term 3 without having to worry about the UCAT at all. So this is a huge thing that can help you a lot, and I personally didn't get that luxury because my UCAT was in about week 4 of term 3. But for the people who did their UCAT in the holidays, it meant that they could really focus on a SAC heavy term, which was term 3, and really get ahead on their SAC preparation and feel confident for their schoolwork without the pressure of the UCAT looming behind them. And it also meant that during the holidays, they were able to have about a week or so where they could really focus on their UCAT and grind the exam and then be really prepared going into test day. So those would be my main strategies that I would use to balance my UCAT work with my schoolwork. And I found that those things really helped me, or would have helped me, to do well on the UCAT and also to balance my schoolwork alongside my UCAT preparation. So that brings me to the end of this video. And if you enjoyed it or learned something, please do leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. If you have any questions about the things I was talking about in this video, or about UCAT or Year 12 or VCE in general, please do send me a DM on Instagram. I read all of them and try to reply to all of them, giving you some specific advice. So do feel free to do that and send me a message. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.